Hello. So last week I realized that I couldn't post a video because I've been reading 2 books the last couple of weeks and it's taking me a lot longer to get through them than I initially anticipated. So I was trying to think of what I could talk about instead of either of those 2 books. And what I came up with was I want to tell you about my favorite book trilogy of all time. And I have read each of these books individually around 50 times, which sounds like a lot, but I've also been reading them since I was in junior high, and I'm 26 now, so I've had plenty of time. But these books were really the thing that solidified my desire to be a writer. Just the way that the author talks about everything is flawless. But trying not to fangirl too much as I give this review. The trilogy is called the Gemma Doyle trilogy, and the first book is A Great and Terrible Beauty. And if you are anyone that knows me, you saw this coming. So, A Great and Terrible Beauty follows the story of an English girl in the late 1800s who discovers not only her own connection, but her family's connection to this secret society of magic. The genre of these books is fantasy fiction, and even though it follows mostly teenage girls, I would say that this is the kind of book where not only could everyone read these books and get something out of it, but I think that everyone should, regardless of your age and regardless of your gender identity. Everyone that reads this, I feel like would be better off. I feel like I get so much fulfillment out of this that I feel like everyone would get something out of reading these books. There's so much more in the subplots than just magic and being at a finishing school in the 1800s. So the first book follows the protagonist, Gemma Doyle, who just turned 16. She has lived her entire life in India, even though she is an English girl. And all of a sudden, her entire life is turned upside down. She is shipped away to a finishing school in the English countryside, following the tragic and mysterious death of her mother. And I'm gonna be honest, when I sat down to try to think of anything about this book that I didn't like, I couldn't think of a single thing. Every single detail of this book is done with so much intention that it's hard to come up with anything that just really bothered me about the way that they're written or about the story as a whole. So I know I normally do 5 things that I like, 5 things that I didn't like, but in this case I'm only going to be able to do 2 things that I didn't like, and they are going to be things that are so nitpicky and so particular to me that you probably won't relate if you have read this book. And if you do eventually read this book, you'll probably not agree with me. So the first thing that I came up with was that some of the scenes are more slow moving, and in my opinion, it kind of breaks up the momentum of the story being told. While I understand that there is a need for downtime in books where the characters just kind of are normal and digest the information that they've been given in other scenes, some of the slower moving scenes kind of hang on a little bit too long, and it almost brings down the desire to read the book a little bit. Like, once you hit one of those scenes, you're just like, okay, I could put down this book and I'll pick it up once I want to read again. Something else about this book that was kind of a little, for me, you have to be this kind of reader in order to feel this way about the book. I wish that they would have focused a little bit more on the classes, considering the fact that most, if not the entirety of this book, takes place at a school. I'm the kind of person that when I'm reading a book, especially one that has to do with a school, I want them to talk about what's happening in the classes so that I can feel like I'm learning something too. And I know, again, that is a very particular thing for someone to want out of a book. I am the kind of person that annotates all of my books, so I'm someone that likes to read with that intention. I want to learn something, and I want to be able to come back to it and remember what it was like learning that. But those are really the only two critiques that I could come up with for this. So, moving on to things that I love about this book, because I've read them so many times, and every time you read it, or at least every time I've read it, everything gets so much better. And I also feel like it's important to read this kind of book at different stages of your life. Considering the fact that I started reading these books when I was in junior high, feeling really angsty and just bitter about the world, and then reading it again in high school, and reading it again in college, and reading it again as an adult. I feel like there are always different things that I pull out of this book that I love, and that just speak to me in a different way. But the things that really capture my attention the most: number one, the friendships in this book grow organically. You start out with this character who's not only new to the school, but new to the country in general. And there are these girls that are really not only just mean, but they're downright cruel to the protagonist. And you see her finding ways to win them over, whether it be through proving herself to these girls or just being kind to someone else. Her roommate is someone that is not in high standing in society, and Gemma, being part of the high society, she at first looks down on her, but finds things to love about her still, and she intentionally brings her into this new group of friends that she is making. I don't know, just the way that the friendships are portrayed and the way that they grow and develop and get deeper throughout the course of the trilogy, it's just wonderful. I love seeing like actual good, healthy friendships in books. Something else that I really liked about this book was that one of the subplots of this book centers around the complex relationship between daughters and their mothers. And I feel like that has a lot to do with how my own relationship with my mother has grown over the course of my life. Being able to see these two characters that are so different and yet have so many things that they share, and seeing how they interact and how they love each other so much that they're able to, even though they fight constantly, they're able to forgive each other every time. And it's not only showing the negative sides of like being the angsty daughter with like the perfect pedestal mother, but showing that the mother is still a human being and has her faults and needs to be forgiven just as much as the angsty teenage daughter. I love that the author chose to write it that way and show that everyone needs compassion and every relationship has its faults and needs communication and needs to be built up again and again. Just really great. Another thing that I really like about this book, the setup for everything starts so early. From that first chapter, everything that happens throughout the rest of the trilogy is already being set up, and even the smallest details matter. And it's so cool because then you get to the part where you see the set-off payoff, or setup, payoff, that's the right order. You see all of the payoff for everything you've been reading, and it's incredible. It blows your mind. Everything is great, and I don't want to give away any spoilers, but the antagonist is a part of this. You don't know who the antagonist is. You know a name, but you don't know who that is until I think it's the end of the second book, and just the way that it's progressed from the very beginning of the first book. Amazing. Something else that I really liked is that Liba Bray, when she was writing this, she didn't pull any punches when it comes to darker topics. She wrote about mental health, and she wrote about societal issues, and she wrote about racial issues, kind of to a lesser extent, but still it's involved. And just seeing how all of this interweaves in this world, and she does it in such a compassionate way without really placing blame, unless it's somewhere that deserves to have blame placed. Just the way she writes all of it. There is mention of course, with this English woman growing up in India, there's not only the racial issues there, but the class issues that go on in that, and then coming back to England, and there is one character from India who follows her there, and seeing how they interact in this new society with these new pressures. And there's also parts where you see things like the maid at the school is an Irish woman, and seeing how the English responded to this Irish woman and how she was treated as lesser than because she wasn't English. Things that you wouldn't really think about as societal issues, but seeing it in the context of the story really makes you realize different things and kind of makes you take a step back yourself, I feel like. There is also just the way that this book is able to be so empowering to women without being destructive to men. I feel like that is a really important message that comes across so well in this book. It is able to build up women and show this whole secret society of women without turning men into the enemy, which I feel like is something that's kind of been lost a lot in the world recently. And that's probably a very unpopular opinion in a lot of circles, but I do feel like this is something that should be talked about more. And that is all I have. This is much longer and ramblier than I thought it would be. I tried really hard not to give away any spoilers, and I tried really hard not to fangirl throughout the entire thing because I love this book so much. And I hope you'll pick up a copy and read it and let me know what you think. All right.